The kingdom of Argoth, once a land of unrivaled beauty and prosperity, now lay in the grip of an unseen terror. A plague, swift and merciless, had descended upon its people, leaving nothing but despair in its wake. Streets were silent, save for the mournful cries of the afflicted and the relentless march of the death carts. In the heart of this desolation walked I, Aaron, the last of the witch hunters. My heavy boots tread upon the cobblestone streets, the sound bouncing off the shuttered windows and closed doors of the city's homes. The air was filled with the scent of death and fear. The kingdom's elders had traced the origin of this plague to a resurgence of witchcraft, a dark blight upon the land that I had sworn to eradicate. With each step, I felt the weight of my purpose, the last line of defense against the encroaching darkness. My journey led me to the edge of the city, to a district long abandoned by hope. Here, the plague's touch was most evident, its victims lying unburied in the streets. It was in this forsaken place that my hunt began, for it was rumored that a coven of witches had taken root, drawing upon forbidden magics that fueled the plague's virulence. As I moved through the desolate streets, my hand rested on the hilt of my blade, a constant companion through countless hunts. It had been forged for this very purpose, its steel blessed by the ancient rites of the church, a lethal bane to those who would consort with the dark. The first sign of the witch's presence was subtle, a chill that crept through the air, a whisper of power that brushed against my senses. I followed it, every sense alert to the dangers that lurked in the shadows. The trail led me to an abandoned warehouse, its doors hanging ajar, the interior swallowed by darkness. I stepped inside, the silence of the place a stark contrast to the chaos of the city. My eyes adjusted to the gloom, revealing the signs of recent habitation, a fire pit still warm from use and the remnants of a crude meal. It was here, amidst the detritus of their refuge, that I found the first real proof of the witch's presence, a sigil crudely drawn in charcoal upon the stone floor. It was a mark of summoning, old and dark, and its discovery confirmed my worst fears. The witches of Argoth were indeed consorting with forces beyond their control, seeking to unleash chaos upon the land. With the sigil as my guide, I prepared to explore deeper into the mystery of the plague, determined to root out the witches responsible for our suffering. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desolate streets of Argoth, I stood alone in the midst of the city's suffering. The discovery of the witch's sigil had ignited hope within me, a belief that perhaps, after countless dead ends and false leads, I was finally on the path to unraveling the source of the plague. The night air was cool against my skin. I pulled my cloak tighter around my shoulders, not against the chill, but as a shield against the despair that seemed to seep from the very stones of Argoth. My thoughts drifted to the past, to the days when I was not the last witch hunter, but one among many. We were revered, feared, a necessary shield against the dark arts. Yet, one by one, my brethren fell, not to the witches we hunted, but to the very people we sought to protect. Accusations of excess, of cruelty beyond necessity, turned the city against us, until I alone remained. These memories weighed heavily upon me, a burden that I carried with each step. The line between justice and vengeance had blurred, leaving me to question the righteousness of my cause. Had my relentless pursuit of the witches become a personal crusade, fueled by the loss of my comrades and the desire for retribution? Lost in thought, I scarcely noticed the gathering crowd until their shouts broke through my reverie. A group of citizens, their faces twisted in fear and anger, had cornered a woman at the edge of the square. Accusations flew like arrows, each word laced with suspicion and hatred. "She's a witch! She's the cause of our suffering!" one man yelled, his voice rising above the din. I approached, my presence parting the crowd like a ship through troubled waters. The woman, no more than a girl really, huddled against the wall, her eyes wide with fear. "Step aside," I commanded, my voice carrying the weight of my office. The crowd hesitated, then obeyed, their murmurs fading to silence. I studied the girl, searching for any sign of the dark arts, but found none. Fear, yes, and desperation, but no hint of malice or magic. She was innocent, a scapegoat for their fear and frustration. "This woman is not a witch," I declared, turning to face the crowd. "Your enemy is not here among you. The true threat lies hidden, cloaked in darkness and deceit. It is them I hunt, not the frightened and the weak." The crowd dispersed, their anger quelled for the moment, but I knew it was a temporary reprieve. The plague had ignited a fire of suspicion and paranoia that would not be easily extinguished. I offered the girl my hand, helping her to her feet. "Go," I said softly. "Find safety. This is no place for the innocent." As she disappeared into the night, I turned my gaze to the darkened streets of Argoth. The witch's sigil had provided a direction, a path to follow, but I knew the road ahead would be dangerous. The witches of Argoth were cunning, their magics intertwined deep within the essence of the plague. Under the cloak of night, the city of Argoth transformed. Shadows danced along the narrow alleys and hidden courtyards, turning familiar streets into a maze of darkness. It was within this obscurity that I pursued the first tangible lead in my quest to eradicate the witchcraft that plagued the kingdom. The sigil's discovery had provided a direction, a thread in the vast tapestry of the city's secrets, leading me to the underbelly of Argoth, where the dim light of the moon barely reached. Yet, beneath this veneer of despair, the faintest trace of magic lingered, a scent that I, through years of hunt and ritual, had learned to discern. I moved with a clear goal, my senses attuned to the whispers of the dark arts. The trail led me to an abandoned building, its once grand facade now marred by the scars of neglect. The door hung ajar, inviting yet foreboding. With a cautious hand I pushed the door open, the creaking of the hinges echoing through the silent halls. Inside, the remnants of a ritual were strewn across the floor. Candles burnt down to stubs, circles of salt and chalk, and in the centre, a tome, its pages filled with the dark scribblings of incantations. My heart quickened at the sight. This was no mere gathering of charlatans. The complexity of the ritual spoke of true power, a witchcraft sophisticated and ancient. As I knelt to examine the tome, a sudden movement caught my eye. From the shadows, a figure lunged, its form shrouded in darkness. I rolled aside, drawing my blade in one fluid motion. The figure halted, its form becoming clear under the moonlight filtering through the broken windows. Before me stood a creature of the dark, a minion of the witches, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. It hissed, a sound that chilled the blood, and charged. The fight was brief but intense. The creature was quick, fueled by enchantments, but I was quicker. Years of hunting had honed my skills, my movements guided by instinct. With a final thrust, my blade found its mark, and the creature fell, dissolving into the shadows from whence it came. Breathing heavily, I turned my attention back to the tome. The pages, now smeared with the remnants of the creature, held the key to the coven's location. Among the incantations, a map was drawn, marking the heart of the plague's origin, the sewers beneath Argoth. As I studied the map, a voice echoed through the empty building, cold and mocking. "You cannot stop what has already begun, witch hunter." I spun, blade ready, but the voice was gone, leaving only the echo of its threat. A chill ran down my spine. This was no simple coven. They were emboldened, confident in their power. With the tome in hand, I made my way to the entrance of the sewers. The path ahead was clear, arduous. The sewers were a maze, home to creatures both natural and summoned, a perfect sanctuary for those who wished to remain hidden. But the stakes were too high to falter now. The plague's source lay beneath the streets of Argoth, festering in the dark. I, Aaron, the last witch hunter, would venture into the depths to confront the coven and unravel the conspiracy that threatened the kingdom. The descent into the sewers of Argoth was like stepping into another world, a realm where darkness reigned, and the sun's warmth was but a distant memory. Water dripped from the cracked ceilings, the sound echoing through the tunnels like the whispers of the dead. I navigated the passages with the tome's map as my guide, its cryptic markings now my only light in the enveloping darkness. The path was treacherous, the ground slick with moss and the refuse of the city above. More than once I found myself losing my footing, catching myself against the cold, damp walls. The deeper I ventured, the more noticeable the sense of magic became. It hung in the air like a thick mist, a sign that I was drawing closer to the heart of the Coven's power. It was here, in the bowels of the city, that the witches conducted their dark rituals, drawing upon the ancient magics that coursed through the veins of Argoth. As I pressed on, the narrow passages opened into a vast hall, its ceilings lost to the shadows above. The air was cooler here, the magic more concentrated, vibrating with energy. In the center of the hall stood an altar, its surface carved with symbols that shone with a faint, eerie light. It was here, amidst the remnants of their rituals, that I felt the presence of the Coven, not through sight or sound, but a pressure in the air, a weight upon my soul. They were close, perhaps watching me from the shadows, gauging my strength. I did not have long to ponder their intentions. From the darkness, creatures emerged, twisted by magic, their forms barely recognizable as once human. They moved with a singular purpose, driven by the will of their witchmasters. The battle was fierce, the creatures relentless. But I was not unprepared. My blade sang through the air, its edge finding flesh and shadow alike. Each strike was guided by years of training, each movement a dance of death, honed on the fields of countless battles. Yet, for every creature that fell, another took its place, their numbers seemingly endless. It was then I realized the true nature of their strategy. They sought not to kill me, but to overwhelm, to drain my strength before the final confrontation. I could not afford to be delayed further. With a final, desperate effort, I pushed through the horde, making my way to a narrow passage that led deeper into the sewer. The creatures did not follow, their task completed. The passage wound its way downward, the incline steep and treacherous. The air grew warmer, the scent of sulfur and brimstone replacing the stench of decay. The magic in the air was almost suffocating now, a clear sign that I was nearing the Coven's lair. After what seemed like an eternity, the passage opened into a vast cavern, the heart of the witch's domain. The hall was bathed in a sickly green light, emanating from a crystal suspended above a ritual circle. Figures moved within the circle, their chants rising and falling in a language that twisted the air itself. I had found the Coven, the architects of Argoth's suffering, but as I prepared to confront them, a voice reverberated through the hall, stopping me in my tracks. "Welcome, witch hunter," it said, a voice laced with malice and amusement. "You have come far, but your journey ends here. The power we wield is beyond your comprehension." I stepped into the light, my blade ready. "I have come to end your plague," I declared, my voice echoing through the cavern. "Your reign of terror ends tonight." The witches turned, their faces hidden beneath hoods, their eyes glowing with malevolent light. The Coven, a circle of darkness within the dim light, stood ready, their chants ceasing as they prepared to unleash their wrath upon me. I stood alone, the last barrier against the tide of darkness that threatened to engulf Argoth. My grip on my blade tightened, a silent vow to those who had fallen before me, to the city that lay in despair above. This was a stand against the night itself. As the witches raised their hands, the air around us began to crackle, the green light intensifying until it was almost blinding. I braced myself, knowing that the first strike would set the tone for the battle to come. It came not as a bolt or a flame, but as a whisper, a sound that crept into my mind, seeking to sow doubt and fear. I shook off the assault, focusing on the task at hand. The first witch moved forward, her hands weaving patterns in the air, summoning creatures of shadow and flame. I charged, my blade cutting through the air, dispelling the shadows as I moved. The fight was relentless. The witches' magic was potent, their dominion over the elements a demonstration of their power. But they had not faced a witch hunter, not one forged in the fires of countless battles. With every strike, every parry, I pushed them back, disrupting their rituals, breaking their concentration. It was then, in the heat of battle, that the unexpected occurred. A figure cloaked in shadow moved through the cavern, its movements almost a blur. It was not until the figure intervened, deflecting a killing blow meant for me, that I realized it was not an enemy, but an ally. The newcomer fought with a grace and precision that spoke of years of training, their magic unlike any I had witnessed. It was not the dark, corrupting force wielded by the coven, but something purer, a light in the overwhelming darkness. Together we turned the tide. The witches, realizing the threat we posed, redoubled their efforts, summoning a beast of shadow and fire, a creature of nightmare that towered over us. The battle raged, the cavern shaking with the force of our conflict, until, with a final concerted effort, the creature was vanquished, dissipating into the ether from whence it came. The coven, their numbers dwindling, their power waning, fell one by one, until only their leader remained. She stood defiant, her power an undeniable force, even in defeat. As I approached, blade in hand, she spoke. "You may defeat us, witch hunter, but you cannot halt what is already in motion. The plague is but a harbinger of what is to come." Her words gave me pause, a chilling prophecy of future struggles, but there was no time for contemplation. With a swift strike, the battle was ended, the witch's threat extinguished. The cavern fell silent, the green light fading as the power that sustained it was no more. I turned to my unexpected ally, questions in my eyes. But before I could speak, they stepped forward, lowering their hood to reveal their face. It was a woman, her features marked by the trials of her own battles, her eyes reflecting a strength and wisdom born of suffering. "I am Tavara," she said, her voice steady. "A witch, yes, but not your enemy. I have fought against this coven, against the corruption they brought to our craft." Her words were a revelation, challenging everything I had known about witches and their magic. Here, in the aftermath of our battle, stood a potential ally, her intentions aligned with my own. "We must act quickly," she continued. "The coven was but a part of a larger threat, one that seeks to tear Argoth apart from within. Together we can stop it." In the silence that followed our departure from the coven's lair, the weight of Tavara's revelations hung heavily between us. The path that lay ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, a maze of shadows and secrets that threatened to engulf the kingdom of Argoth in its dark embrace. As we navigated the serpentine alleys that led back to the surface, the first light of dawn began to pierce the veil of night, casting a pale glow over the city's desolate streets. "Our first task is to uncover the extent of this conspiracy," Tavara said, her voice cutting through the stillness. "The coven was but one piece of a larger puzzle. We must understand the full picture if we are to have any hope of stopping what is to come." I nodded, my mind racing with the implications of her words. The plague, the resurgence of witchcraft, the coven's dark rituals, all were interconnected, threads in a tapestry woven with malice and ambition. But who stood to gain from Argoth's demise? And how deep did the roots of this conspiracy reach? Our search for answers led us first to the archives of the city's library, a repository of knowledge untouched by the chaos that had consumed the streets. Within its hallowed halls, we pored over ancient texts and forgotten manuscripts, searching for any clue that might shed light on the forces arrayed against us. It was there, among the dust-covered tomes of history, that we discovered the first tangible evidence of the conspiracy's scope. A series of clandestine communications hidden within the margins of a seemingly innocuous ledger. Detailed meetings between members of the city's elite and unknown entities. Their words veiled in secrecy and code. "The nobility is involved," I muttered, disbelief in my voice. "But to what end? What do they stand to gain from the city's ruin?" Tavara's expression was grim as she traced the lines of the coded messages with her finger. Power, perhaps, or something darker, something tied to the ancient magics that this land was built upon. We must decipher these communications, uncover the identities of those involved. Our efforts to break the code led us deep into the night. With each piece of the puzzle that fell into place, the magnitude of the threat became clearer. The nobility, or at least certain factions within it, had conspired with dark forces, seeking to harness the plague as a weapon against their rivals, both within and beyond the kingdom's borders. But as the final pieces of the code revealed themselves, a more sinister plot emerged. The plague was but the first step in a ritual of unimaginable power, a ritual that, if completed, would unleash devastation not seen since the ancient wars of magic that had scarred the land centuries ago. "We must act," Tavara said, her voice a whisper of urgency. "If the ritual is completed, the plague will seem a mere trifle in comparison to the havoc that will be wrought." Armed with our newfound knowledge, we set out to confront those behind the conspiracy. The task was daunting. The enemies we faced entrenched in power and shrouded in magic. Yet, we were not without allies. The truths uncovered in the library had revealed not just the architects of Argoth's suffering, but those who, like Tavara, sought to oppose the darkness. Gathering this unlikely coalition of witches, scholars, and disenfranchised nobles, we devised a plan to expose and dismantle the conspiracy. The risks were great, the chance of betrayal ever present, but the stakes were higher still. Argoth stood on the brink of annihilation, its fate hanging in the balance. As the day of confrontation drew near, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had led me here. I, Aaron, the last witch hunter, had set out to eradicate the source of the plague, to purge the kingdom of witchcraft. Instead, I had found an ally in a witch, uncovered a conspiracy that spanned the echelons of power, and stood ready to defend the kingdom alongside those I had once sworn to destroy. The day had arrived, a moment teetering on the brink of history, where the fate of Argoth would be forged not in the council chambers or on the battlefields of old, but in the shadowed halls of conspiracy and dark magic. Tavara and I, alongside our assembled allies, stood at the edge of dawn, ready to confront the architects of the kingdom's despair. Our plan was multifaceted, a blend of subterfuge, confrontation, and arcane might. We would infiltrate the noble's estate where the final ritual was to be held, expose the conspirators before the court, and disrupt the arcane workings that threatened to unleash chaos upon Argoth. The estate loomed before us, a bastion of power and privilege, its walls hiding the dark secrets that had led the kingdom to the brink of ruin. Our coalition, though united, was an assembly of the kingdom's outcasts and forgotten, each member bearing the scars of their own battles against the darkness. Tavara, with her profound knowledge of the arcane, led a small team tasked with disrupting the ritual. Their path would take them deep into the heart of the estate, where the ritual's energies were concentrated. I, with a group of former soldiers and disenfranchised nobles, would confront the conspirators directly, bringing the fight to their doorstep. The infiltration began under the cover of darkness, our movements masked by the spells of our witch allies. We moved through the shadows, undetected by the guards and wards that protected the estate. As Tavara and her team descended into the catacombs beneath the estate, the air grew dense with arcane energy, the pulse of the ritual beating like a heart of darkness. They moved with caution, aware that the slightest misstep could bring ruin upon us all. Above, our confrontation with the conspirators unfolded with a ferocity that shook the foundations of the estate. The nobles, cloaked in arrogance and power, were unprepared for the wrath of those they had deemed beneath them. The battle was fierce, the clash of steel and magic reverberating through the halls, a symphony of retribution for the suffering of Argoth. In the catacombs, Tavara's team faced challenges of their own. The ritual's guardians, creatures twisted by dark magic, stood between them and the ritual's heart. With a blend of magic and martial prowess, they fought their way through, each victory bringing them closer to their goal. The moment of truth arrived as Tavara reached the ritual's nexus, the air alive with the power of the impending doom. With a calm born of inner strength, she began the counter-ritual, her voice rising above the din of battle. Above, the tide turned in our favor as the conspirators fell, one by one, their plans unraveling before the might of our alliance. Yet, victory was not assured, the ritual's completion still a breath away from unleashing destruction upon us all. As Tavara's incantations reached their crescendo, the energy in the catacombs surged, a maelstrom of conflicting forces. Then, with a final, decisive word, the ritual was disrupted, its energies dissipating harmlessly into the air. The estate fell silent, the battles above and below coming to an abrupt end. We had prevailed, the conspiracy thwarted, and the ritual stopped. But our victory was not without cost. The estate lay in ruins, a reflection of the battle that had raged within its walls, and among our number were those who would not see the dawn. In the aftermath, as the sun rose over Argoth, I stood with Tavara surveying the toll of our efforts. The alliance we had forged, born of necessity and shared peril, had saved the kingdom. Yet the path ahead remained uncertain, the scars of our battle a reminder of the fragile peace we had secured. "We have won the day," Tavara said, her gaze meeting mine. "But the night is long, and shadows still linger in the heart of Argoth. Together, we have faced the darkness, and together, we must continue to guard against its return." Her words rang true, a vow for the future, a promise of vigilance in the face of the darkness that still haunted the edges of our world. As the last witch hunter, my journey had taken me from the depths of despair to the heights of triumph, alongside allies I had never imagined. In the aftermath of our confrontation at the estate, the city of Argoth awoke to a new reality. The conspiracy that had sought to bring ruin upon the kingdom had been exposed, its architects either slain or in chains, awaiting judgment. Yet, the victory we had achieved was but the first step on a long road to healing the deep wounds that the plague and the dark machinations behind it had inflicted upon the land. The day following the battle, as the city stirred from its troubled sleep, Tavara and I set about the task of gathering evidence to present to the king's court. It was imperative that we solidify our claims with irrefutable proof of the conspiracy, to ensure that those responsible were brought to justice and to prevent any remnants of their dark coalition from rising anew. Our search led us back to the ruined estate. The once imposing halls were silent. Amidst the rubble and the remnants of dark rituals, we found documents, correspondences between the conspirators, and arcane artifacts that spoke of their intentions with chilling clarity. Each piece of evidence we uncovered painted a more detailed picture of the conspiracy's breadth and depth. It became clear that what we had uncovered was not merely a plot against the kingdom, but a web of alliances that spanned beyond Argoth's borders, hinting at a larger, more ominous threat that loomed in the shadows. As we ventured deeper into the estate's secrets, we discovered a hidden room, its entrance cunningly concealed beneath the wreckage. Inside, a trove of documents awaited, detailing the conspirators' plans and the extent of their reach. Among the parchments, a ledger stood out, its pages meticulously recording transactions and communications with entities both within the kingdom and beyond, revealing a network of influence and corruption that had allowed the conspiracy to flourish. With the evidence in hand, we made our way to the king's court. The court was in session, with the murmurs of the assembled nobility and their eyes upon us as we entered. Tavara, ever composed, presented our findings with a clarity and conviction that silenced the room. The documents and artifacts were laid before the court, each piece contributing to an undeniable proof of the depth of the betrayal that had sought to undermine the kingdom. The reaction was immediate. Shock and outrage swept through the court as the reality of the conspiracy was laid bare. Calls for justice rang out, echoing off the walls of the chamber, as the king, his expression grave, rose to address the assembly. "The evidence presented here today reveals a betrayal of the highest order," he began, his voice steady and commanding. "Those who sought to bring ruin upon our kingdom will be met with the full weight of our justice. We owe a debt of gratitude to those who have exposed this treachery, who have fought against the darkness to safeguard our land." His gaze found Tavara and me, a nod of acknowledgement that spoke volumes. In that moment, the divide that had once separated us, the witch hunter and the witch, seemed to vanish, replaced by a mutual respect born of our shared struggle. As the court adjourned, with the promise of swift action against those implicated in the conspiracy, Tavara and I stepped into the daylight. The burden of our task momentarily lifted. Yet, as we looked out upon the city, its streets beginning to stir with life once more, we knew that our work was far from over. The conspiracy had been unveiled, its immediate threat quelled, but the shadows that had nurtured it still lingered, both within Argoth and beyond. The kingdom of Argoth embarked on a path of recovery and reconciliation. Yet for Tavara and me, peace was a distant horizon. For the roots of the plague, a shadow over our land, remained deeply entrenched. Its origin, a mystery we were compelled to unravel. Guided by the evidence we had gathered, our investigation took us beyond the confines of the city, to the forgotten reaches of the kingdom where ancient magics lingered and the fabric of reality wore thin. It was here, amid the ruins of a long-abandoned temple to the old gods, that we hoped to find the key to the plague's true nature and its purpose. The temple lay hidden within a dense forest, its presence betrayed only by whispers among the local populace, tales of a damned place shunned by all who valued their sanity. As we navigated the tangled undergrowth, the temple emerged before us, its stone arches and spires cloaked in a veil of ivy, as if nature itself sought to reclaim the blasphemies committed within its walls. The sense of unrest that pervaded the forest deepened, a silent warning to turn back. Yet, we pressed on, driven by the need to confront whatever darkness lay at the heart of the plague. The interior of the temple was shrouded in darkness. Our torches wavered as if reluctant to dispel the shadows that clung to every corner. The walls were carved with sigils and runes, their meanings obscured by time, but their intent unmistakably malevolent. In the temple's inner sanctum, we found it, an altar of obsidian. At its center, a chalice wrought from a material that seemed to absorb the light around it. The chalice pulsed with a malevolent energy, at once both enticing and repulsive. This, we realized, was the source of the plague, not merely a disease of the body, but a corruption of the very essence of life, a weapon designed to weaken the veil between worlds. Tavara's knowledge of the arcane was key to deciphering the runes that surrounded the altar, revealing the ritual that had given birth to the plague. It was a ritual of summoning, intended to call forth entities from beyond the veil, their entry into our world facilitated by the weakening of its inhabitants. The realization was a chilling one. The plague was but the first step in a plan of much greater scope, a plan that had been thwarted by the conspiracy's defeat, but might still be set in motion by other, unseen hands. "We must destroy it," Tavara said, her voice resolute as she gestured to the chalice. "This cannot be allowed to remain. A threat to all life, in Argoth. The chalice was protected by wards of formidable power, and its destruction required a ritual of our own, a delicate balance of magic and will to undo the bindings that held the plague's essence in check. As we prepared the counter-ritual, the temple seemed to awaken, the air vibrating with an unseen wrath. Shadows twisted and coiled around us, forming shapes of terror, manifestations of the chalice's desire to survive. Yet, united in purpose, we pressed on, our voices joining in the incantations that would seal the chalice's fate. With the final words spoken, a surge of energy erupted from the altar, a scream of rage that shook the temple to its foundations. Then, as quickly as it had begun, it was over. The chalice lay dormant, its power extinguished, the threat it posed nullified. As we emerged from the temple, the forest around us seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, the miasma that had pervaded the air dissipating like a bad dream. The plague's origin had been uncovered and neutralized, a dark chapter in Argoth's history brought to a close. In the days that followed our return to Argoth, the city began to stir with newfound hope. The plague had been vanquished, its origins laid bare and neutralized through our efforts. Yet, the victory brought with it a weight of responsibility and a choice that would define the path ahead for both Tavara and me. The king, recognizing the magnitude of our deeds, summoned us to the royal court. The throne room was filled with the kingdom's most influential figures, their eyes upon us as we approached. "Your actions have saved Argoth from a fate too grim to contemplate," the king began, his voice echoing through the hall. "The bravery and wisdom you have shown in the face of darkness have proven invaluable to our kingdom. It is my will to offer you both positions within my council, to serve as guardians of Argoth, and to lead our efforts in safeguarding the realm from the threats that lurk beyond our sight." The offer was a high honor, recognition of our deeds, and a sign of the trust the king placed in us. Yet as I looked to Tavara, I saw the conflict mirrored in her eyes, the same turmoil that churned within me. To accept the king's offer would mean a life bound to the court, to politics and the machinations of power. It would grant us the authority to act, to shape the kingdom's defenses against the dark forces we knew still sought to breach our world. Yet it would also tether us to the whims of the crown, to decisions made not on the battlefield but in the shadowed halls of diplomacy. "We are grateful for your offer, Your Majesty," Tavara spoke, her voice steady. "But before we can accept, we must ask for a boon. The fight against the darkness is not one that can be waged from the comfort of the court. We need the freedom to act, to investigate, and confront these threats on our terms with the full support of the crown." The king considered her words, the silence in the hall tangible. After a moment, he nodded. "Your request is reasonable. You shall have my full support, and the authority to act as you see fit in matters concerning the realm's safety. In return, I ask only that you keep the crown informed of your actions and seek counsel when necessary." It was a compromise, one that afforded us the autonomy we desired while still binding us to the service of the kingdom. With a mutual glance, an unspoken agreement passed between Tavara and me. We had walked the path of shadows together, faced the darkness, and emerged victorious. This decision was but another step on that journey, one we would take together. "We accept, Your Majesty," I said, bowing deeply. "We pledge to defend Argoth from the threats that seek its downfall, to act as its guardians against the darkness." The court erupted in applause. The king's decision met with approval. As we stepped back, the weight of our new roles settling upon us, I realized that the battle we had fought was but a single skirmish in a much larger war. The forces that had sought to use the plague for their own ends were still out there, their plans unknown but undoubtedly sinister. In the weeks that followed, Tavara and I began to lay the groundwork for our new roles. We established a network of informants and allies, researched into ancient texts for knowledge of the arcane, and trained those who would stand with us against the darkness. The kingdom of Argoth now had its guardians, a witch and a witch hunter. Yet, even as we prepared, a sense of unease lingered. The destruction of the chalice had sent ripples through the fabric of magic, its consequences yet to fully reveal themselves. And in the dark corners of the world, eyes watched, schemes unfolded, and powers beyond our understanding began to stir. Tavara and I found ourselves embroiled in a world far removed from the shadowed battles we were accustomed to. The court's intrigues and alliances were a web of their own, demanding navigation with as much care as any darkened forest. Yet, our true purpose never wavered. As guardians of Argoth, we dedicated ourselves to fortifying the kingdom against the darkness, a task that required more than just swords and spells. The first step was to solidify our network, to rally those who, like us, had known the sting of the outcast's brand. We reached out to the forgotten and the shunned, to the wielders of magic who had practiced their arts in the shadows, and to the warriors who had lost their standing for daring to speak against corruption. Each of them brought unique strengths to our cause, and in their eyes, I saw the same resolve that burned within Tavara and me. Our efforts bore fruit in the form of a clandestine meeting, held under the cover of darkness in the ruins of an old fortress that lay beyond the city's bounds. It was here that we gathered our allies, standing amidst the remnants of battles long past, a fitting backdrop for the war we were preparing to wage. As guardians of this kingdom, we have pledged to defend it from the darkness that seeks its end, I began, my voice echoing off the stone walls. But we cannot stand alone. The threats we face are many, and they grow in strength with each passing day. We need your skills, your knowledge, and your courage if we are to prevail. Tavara stepped forward, her presence commanding the attention of all who had gathered. The darkness does not discriminate in its hunger, she added. It will consume us all if given the chance. We have seen its power, felt its touch. Together, we have a chance to push it back, to protect our homes and our people. The response was a unified one, a chorus of voices raised in agreement. Witches and warriors, scholars and scouts, each pledged their allegiance to our cause. In their faces, I saw the dawn of a new chapter for Argoth, a coalition of the willing, drawn together by the common goal of safeguarding the realm. With our ranks bolstered, we turned our attention to the task of preparation. Training commenced within the fortress, a grueling regimen designed to hone our allies' skills and to foster unity among our diverse ranks. Magic and metal were melded in exercises that simulated the battles to come, each scenario crafted from the knowledge we had gleaned of our enemies. Yet, as our preparations advanced, a sense of apprehension settled over me. The destruction of the chalice had indeed sent ripples through the magical fabric of our world, and reports began to trickle in of disturbances across the kingdom. Shadowy figures seen at the edge of vision, creatures of myth stirring from ancient slumbers, and a substantial increase in the ambient magic of the land. It was during a council convened in the depths of the fortress that the true scope of our challenge became apparent. A scout, breathless from haste, brought word of a village to the north, besieged by forces that bore the mark of the darkness we sought to contain. It was a clear sign that our enemies were on the move, emboldened by the shifts in the world's magic. "We must act!" Tavara declared, her voice a clarion call to action. "This is but the first of many assaults if we do not meet this threat head-on." And so, with our newly forged alliance at our back, we set out for the village, a test of our resolve, and the first battle in the war to come. As we marched, I reflected on the path that had led us here, to this moment of unity in the face of encroaching darkness. The outcasts of Argoth, once shunned and scattered, were now its staunchest defenders, rallied under a banner of hope and resistance. As dawn broke over the horizon, casting a pale light across the land, our coalition approached the northern village, the urgency of our mission driving us forward. The village, a small collection of thatched cottages and winding dirt paths, lay eerily silent, its usual morning bustle stifled by the shadow of impending assault. Tavara and I surveyed the village from a nearby hilltop, our allies arrayed behind us, a diverse host of warriors, mages and scouts, each prepared to lay down their lives for the kingdom. "The enemy approaches from the forest," one of our scouts reported, returning from a swift reconnaissance. "They move with intent, and their numbers are greater than we anticipated. Dark sorcery shields them, masking their true strength." Tavara's expression was grim as she absorbed the news. "We must fortify the village, protect the innocents. Our strategy must be twofold: a defensive line to hold them back, and a strike team to break their ranks and target their leaders." Our forces mobilized with haste, transforming the village into a fortress. Barricades rose at the entrances, and wards of protection were carved into the earth and woven through the air by our mages. The villagers, though fearful, aided in the preparations. As the enemy emerged from the tree line, their forms became visible. A horde of twisted creatures, shadows given flesh, and dark mages whose chants twisted the air with the promise of desolation. At their head marched a figure shrouded in a cloak of darkness, power emanating from him like a wave of heat. The siege began with a barrage of dark magic, bolts of shadow and fire raining down upon the village. Our mages countered with spells of light and protection, their efforts creating a barrier that blunted the assault. Arrows and bolts flew from behind the barricades, finding their marks among the advancing horde. Tavara and I led the strike team, a carefully selected group of our most skilled fighters and mages. We flanked the enemy's advance, moving with stealth to avoid the brunt of their magical assault. Our target was clear: the dark figure who commanded the horde, the key to breaking their siege. The battle raged, the clash of steel and the roar of spells filling the air. Our coalition fought with a ferocity born of desperation and hope, each strike driven by the need to protect our homes and loved ones. As we neared the enemy leader, the true nature of our foe became apparent. He was a necromancer of great power, his command over the dead a blasphemy against the natural order. His eyes, when they met ours, held a depth of malice and cunning that chilled the blood. The confrontation was swift but brutal. Tavara and I, aided by our strike team, engaged the necromancer, our combined might a storm against his defenses. Spells clashed with spells, and steel met bone, the necromancer's dark magic seeking to overwhelm us with the fury of the abyss. Yet even as the battle turned in our favor, the necromancer unleashed a final, desperate gambit, a spell of destruction that threatened to consume us all. It was only through Tavara's quick action, a counterspell wrought of light and sacrifice, that the magic was contained, the explosion turning inward and consuming the necromancer in a blaze of purifying flame. With their leader fallen, the enemy's ranks broke, the dark magic that had bolstered them dissipating like mist in the morning sun. Our forces pressed the advantage, driving the remnants of the horde back into the shadows from whence they came. The village was saved, its people emerging from their homes to witness the aftermath of the battle, the ground littered with the fallen. Yet in their eyes, there was gratitude and a faint hint of hope. As we regrouped, tending to our wounded and mourning our dead, I realized that this battle was but the first of many. The enemy we faced was relentless, their dark masters yet unseen, their plans a web that stretched across the kingdom. After the siege, the village slowly began to knit itself back together. Amidst the reconstruction, Tavara and I, alongside our coalition, took little time to rest. The necromancer's final act, a spell of such malevolent intent, hinted at darker forces at play. a puzzle piece of a larger, more ominous picture that we were determined to uncover. With the villagers' gratitude echoing in our ears, we departed at dawn, guided by fresh intelligence from our scouts. They had tracked the remnants of the horde to a desolate castle, hidden within the dense forest to the west, a place shrouded in dark legends and whispered fears. It was here, our scouts believed, that we would find the answers we sought, the true architects of the darkness threatening Argoth. The journey was arduous, the forest itself seeming to resist our passage, yet we pressed on, driven by the need to protect the kingdom from the encroaching darkness. The castle loomed before us. It was a place out of time, its stones imbued with dark magics and its halls echoing with the whispers of the past. The heavy silence that hung over it was broken only by the cawing of crows, a foreboding welcome to those who dared to tread its forsaken grounds. Our approach was cautious, the lessons of the village siege fresh in our minds. We knew that brute force alone would not suffice. The castle's defences, both physical and magical, were formidable. Tavara and I convened with our lieutenants, formulating a plan that would allow us to breach the castle's walls and confront whatever evils lay within. The assault began under the cover of night, our mages weaving spells of concealment to mask our approach. We split our forces, with Tavara leading a team to dismantle the magical barriers protecting the castle, while I led another to scale the walls and secure a foothold within. The battle to enter the castle was fierce. Guardians animated by dark spells rose to meet us, their forms twisted and grotesque, a mockery of life. Yet our resolve was unyielding, our swords and spells cutting through the darkness as we fought our way into the heart of the enemy's lair. Inside, the castle's corridors were a maze of shadow and deception, each turn revealing new horrors. A library of forbidden texts that whispered madness to those who listened. Halls adorned with fabrics that moved of their own accord. And chambers where the air was thick with the scent of blood and terror. Our progress was slow, each step contested by the castle's guardians and traps cunningly devised to prey on the unwary. Yet we pressed on. It was in the depths of the castle that we found him. The master of the horde, a sorcerer whose name was spoken only in quiet tones, feared even among his own kind. His power was immense, the air around him crackling with the force of his magic. The confrontation was inevitable, a clash of light against darkness. Tavara and I stood side by side, our allies arrayed behind us, ready to face the sorcerer in a battle that would decide the fate of Argoth. The sorcerer's laughter echoed through the hall, a sound devoid of joy, filled instead with the promise of our demise. "Welcome, guardians of Argoth," he sneered, his voice a serpent's hiss. "You have come far, but you are too late. The pieces are in motion, and soon the darkness will consume your precious kingdom." Tavara and I exchanged a glance, a silent vow passing between us. We had faced the darkness together, had stood side by side against horrors untold, and this moment would be no different. With our allies at our backs, we advanced, the light of our determination piercing the gloom that filled the hall. The sorcerer's first assault was a wave of shadow, a tide of darkness that sought to overwhelm us. Our mages countered with spells of light. The clash of powers lit up the hall, revealing the grotesque murals that adorned its walls, each a testimony of the sorcerer's reign of terror. As the battle raged, the sorcerer unleashed his guardians, creatures of nightmare that emerged from the shadows to do his bidding. They were formidable opponents, each blow they struck fueled by dark magic. Yet, they were not invincible. Together, we fought them back, our blades and spells a symphony of resistance against the darkness. Tavara, her focus unwavering, chanted the incantations for a spell of binding, a daring gambit to contain the sorcerer's power. I stood at her side, my sword a guard against any who would interrupt her casting. The sorcerer, sensing the threat, turned his full wrath upon us. He spoke words of power, ancient and forbidden, seeking to break our resolve and turn our own shadows against us. But we stood firm, our spirits bolstered by the righteousness of our cause. With a final, desperate effort, the sorcerer unleashed a maelstrom of dark energy, a vortex that sought to consume all in its path. It was then that Tavara completed her spell, her voice rising above the storm, a clarion call that pierced the darkness. The binding took hold, chains of light wrapping around the sorcerer, pulling him into their embrace. His scream of rage and despair vibrated through the hall as he fought against the spell. But it was in vain. The chains tightened, and with a blinding flash, the sorcerer was contained, his power shackled by the very light he sought to extinguish. The hall fell silent, the shadows receding as if in retreat. We stood amidst the ruins of the battle, weary but victorious. The sorcerer's plans had been thwarted, his reign of terror brought to an end. Yet, even as we celebrated our victory, we knew that this was but a battle won in a larger war. The darkness that threatened Argoth was not vanquished, merely pushed back into the shadows from whence it came. The sorcerer's artifacts and tomes, recovered from the depths of the castle, held secrets that we would need to unravel to prevent further assaults on our realm. As we emerged from the castle, the first light of dawn greeted us, a new day dawning for Argoth. The kingdom had been saved, but the threat of darkness lingered. As the light of dawn spread across the kingdom of Argoth, it illuminated a land forever changed by the battles fought in the shadows. The defeat of the sorcerer marked a turning point, a moment of triumph not just for Tavara and me, but for all who had stood against the encroaching darkness. Yet, as we returned to the kingdom, our hearts heavy with the cost of our victory, we understood that our journey was far from over. The kingdom welcomed us as heroes, the streets of the capital filled with citizens who came to celebrate the guardians of Argoth. Their cheers were a balm to our weary spirits, a reminder of the lives we had fought to protect. But amidst the celebrations, there was work to be done. The king, grateful for our service, offered us honors and titles, recognition of our deeds in the face of darkness. Yet, for Tavara and me, the greatest reward was the opportunity to continue our work, to use the knowledge and power we had gained to safeguard the kingdom from future threats. Together, we founded the Order of the Dawn, a brotherhood of warriors, mages, and scholars dedicated to defending Argoth against the darkness. Our victory had also brought us closer, the bond forged in battle now unbreakable. Tavara and I, once unlikely allies, had become partners in truth, our fates intertwined with the destiny of the kingdom we had sworn to protect. Our journey had taught us the value of unity, of the strength found in the diversity of our coalition, and these were the principles upon which the Order of the Dawn was built. Yet, as the celebrations faded and we turned our attention to the task of rebuilding, a new mystery emerged. Among the artifacts recovered from the sorcerer's castle was an ancient tome, its pages filled with cryptic prophecies and dark portents. The tome spoke of a cycle, a recurring battle against the darkness that had plagued Argoth for centuries. It was a sobering reminder that our victory, though significant, was but a chapter in a longer saga. The darkness would return, as it always had, and we would be ready to face it, armed with the knowledge and power we had gained. As we stood on the battlements of the capital, looking out over the kingdom we had fought to protect, I felt a sense of peace. We had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but more importantly, we had ignited a flame of hope, a promise that Argoth would stand resilient in the face of whatever challenges lay ahead. The Order of the Dawn was our legacy. Under its banner, the kingdom would be defended by a new generation of guardians, warriors of light who would carry on the fight against the darkness. And so, as the sun set on the horizon, Tavara and I turned from the battlements, our hearts light with the knowledge that, though the darkness would return, Argoth would not face it alone. We had laid the foundations for a future where the light would always rise to meet the shadows. A future we would face together, as guardians of the dawn. The story of the last witch hunter of Argoth and the witch who stood by his side would be told for generations, a tale of courage, unity, and the unyielding fight against the darkness. But for us, it was simply the beginning,